If you've been with us the last couple of weeks, we've started this series called Surrender. And the verses that were up there are from Romans 12, 1 and 2. And that's where we'll be the entirety of this series. You will know it inside and out, backwards, forwards, upside down, and with your eyes closed, I promise. As long as you stick with us, you may never forget this verse as long as you live. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. And that's why I took a little bit of creative liberty. I made a cute little video. If you want to see that, I'll post it onto our Facebook page. A little plug, we have a Facebook page. I'll post it on there if you want to rewatch it. It's pretty good if I do say so myself. But I think the best part of that video is the scripture that it talks about in it. And so, without further ado, we are going to get right into it. Like I said, we've been talking about surrender, and if I counted correctly, we're in week 3 of surrender. I'm getting nods, so I am good at counting. So we're in week 3 of surrender, and for some of you, you might resonate with this when I say it, but I have never been a huge fan of surrender. It sounds like giving up, it sounds like quitting, and I'm not a quitter. So it's not a very fun word that I like to see or use or have anything to do with, typically. But as I continue to read, the book that this is based off of, called Surrender, as I read that, as I searched my life, as I began to dig deeper on the true meaning of surrender, I began to warm up to the idea that maybe surrender is not about quitting necessarily. And so I hope you keep that in mind with you as we go on. I don't want to lose you in the first 5 minutes. Surrender, I'm not talking about your possessions. If you want to give me stuff, I'll take it, but don't worry. Just keep an open mind about what surrender could, might, and does mean. We're going to be talking about the pathway of surrender. When you think of a pathway, or you think of a path, or you think of a sidewalk, it's usually leading you somewhere. Hopefully. Unless you're in one of Shel Silverstein's poems, hopefully the sidewalk will lead you somewhere. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. How do we get from here to surrender? What does that look like? What turns and twists are we going to take? And how that's different for each and every single one of you sitting here. And so I ask, have you ever found yourself saying, it feels like I'm taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back? Now, like I already said, I'm not great at math, but I'm pretty sure that you're not progressing if you take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And you can feel free to tell me if I got that wrong after the service, but I'm pretty sure that if you're constantly taking more steps backwards than you are forward, you're not really gaining any ground. Unless the purpose is to go backwards, then you're doing a great job. But usually that's said in a negative way. That's said in a, I'm trying, and I'm trying, and I'm trying, and I'm working towards this goal, I'm headed in this direction, and I want to be here. And yet every time I seem to go in that direction, somehow I find myself over here. And how did that happen? And now I have to work even harder to get back to where I was when I started. We've all been there. When you know that there's a goal that you're working towards, but sometimes you're being held back, it's hard to admit that the thing that might be holding you back is yourself. And I don't want to step on any toes, but actually I do, when I say that, are you getting in your own way? Are you stepping in front of the path that is laid out in front of you? Are you building up, and I know this is true for myself, are you building up your truths because you're too afraid of what the real truth that God is giving you might look like? And that's something that I have been working through the last, how old am I? That's something that I've been working through specifically the last 3 or 4 weeks of what does my truth look like in comparison to God's truth? Because if my truth doesn't match God's truth, then my surrender is not going to be surrender, and my truth is actually a lie. And so I want you guys to think about that. It's a lot of heavy stuff right at the beginning, but it'll be okay. We've got some fun stuff as well. When we look at us holding us back, it's really hard for us to admit that it may be our fault. And so we're like, why, God, why can't we get to where we want to be? Why can't I have this and that? And why is someone else where I want to be? Why is that fair? And how can we break that cycle? Hopefully I address these things. That's my plan. If the Spirit leads me in a different way, then we'll go with it. But my plan is to address how do we break this cycle of getting in our own way, and how do we walk the path of surrender without taking 2 or 4 or 10 steps back every time we take one forward. So we're going to explore a narrow walk of surrender. You see this aisleway right in the middle. 3 people could probably walk down it at once, right? Well, surrender, when we look at ourselves, is only big enough to fit one person. And you're probably thinking, oh, it's big enough to fit me. No, it's big enough to fit God to walk down and grab your hand and pull you along. Because, like I said in the beginning, surrender is not easy. And we don't like it, and it's negative, and it feels like I'm giving up and I'm quitting. But your surrender is your surrender. It's not my surrender. It's not Pastor Dennis's surrender. It's not Brad's surrender. It's my surrender. The things that I have to give up, the things that I have to give over to God, might not be the same things for everybody else. And so how am I to address every single one of you in a different and personal way to talk to you about what it means to be on the path of surrender? I have an hour, right? Just kidding. In about 30 minutes, how do I address a whole crowd individually in surrender when I only have about 30 minutes to do so? Well, I'll tell you a little secret. The Bible has just about 99% of anything that anyone will need to find their personal walk with Christ. The things that you need to give up, the things that you need to be striving for, the race that you need to be running. And so that's what we're going to be in. We're going to be in the Word. We're going to be in Romans. We're going to have a couple other scriptures to kind of go along with that. But if you want to get to Romans or have Romans open or be ready for that, that is where we will be. Surrender is something that, if we're honest, is hard. It is easy to say that you're giving things up. It's easy to act like you're giving things up, and it's really easy to give things up that don't matter. I heard this said at one of the various meetings or community events, or I talked to so many people. It's just like I don't know where it came from, and I attribute it to whoever it was. If you're watching or if you know, this is not my original thought, and I don't remember what it is. Oh, I remember. So it's easy to give up. Sorry, I get distracted. It's easy to give up something that isn't an issue for you. I have been free of bank robbing for 22 years. I haven't done it, and thank God that He's taken that from me. It's so easy for me to give that up. It's really easy for me to give up like pushing children down, because I try not to do that on purpose ever, and so I really thank God that He's working in my life so that I don't do that. But it's harder to give up the things that we do struggle with, like road rage or speeding or maybe spending too much money on things that you don't need. And I'm not pointing anyone out. This is more some things that I struggle with sometimes. And it's harder to give that up because when that person's going really slow in front of you, you just want to say, go! But you do it a little more like calm because, you know, you've got the Jesus sticker on the back, and sometimes you're in the church van and it's got the name on the side. And so you got to like internalize that a little bit. Those are a lot harder to give up because you just want to push into those situations where you're naturally inclined to be. But what if surrender wasn't giving up? What if surrender was actually giving in. Now, this can also be used for the negative things, the road rage, the speeding, the excessive trafficking, the whatever it may be that you're struggling with, giving into those things. But what I'm asking you to do is, what if it looks like giving in to what God has for you? Instead of looking at surrender as giving up our desires and our wants and our lives the way we want them, what if it means giving in to God's greater design for our life? And I hope that if you're here, you're at least searching or seeking or wanting to know what there is beyond just our existence. That it's not just us existing to exist and then we turn back to dust and then that's it. We cease to exist, we cease to be. I hope that you're at least seeking the answer of who is God, why is this all real? And so I'm hoping that you also believe that if God is real, that He created you. He created you unique, He created you special, not in like a negative way, in a very positive way. He knows every single hair on your head, and He designed a life for you to live. And He doesn't want you to live in a life that's less than that. He'll let you, I promise you that, but He doesn't want you to. And so what if surrender was giving in to the life that God has in mind for you, instead of the life and expectations that you have for yourself? And this is something that I've talked on a couple of times when I've been up here. I have big expectations, not only of myself, but of my life, of my ministry, of my goals. I graduated college a year early. That is not to pat myself on the back or get any praise. I graduated college a year early because I wanted to be where I wanted to be. Luckily, God had provided a way for me to go to that college and to graduate early and to take enough classes and to have the right credits. My desire was carried through by God, and He was faithful to me in that. And you know what? It would have been okay if He wasn't. If I took 5 or 6 or hopefully not more than that years, it would have been okay. But we have our own expectations of what our life looks like. Sometimes that lines up with what God has for us, and sometimes it doesn't. It can kind of look like a Venn diagram, where we have our circle, and we have God's circle, and maybe sometimes like 10% of that overlaps if we're completely living for our circle. But if we're completely living for God's circle, those circles should, more often than not, overlap. You shouldn't have a lot in your circle of expectations, even though we do. I'm not saying that if you do, you're wrong, because I do. I'm not trying to bash you at all, but we get stuck in this idea of us, that we miss His greater purpose for us, beyond what we can fathom and imagine and create in our own minds. Would you say that you have a pretty good sense of self-control? I see a lot of no's. Thank you for being honest, because I agree. Not that you don't, but that I don't. That I feel like we as a people, in general, the world, have a really hard time with controlling ourselves. I don't know if you sat and watched a long string of commercials, maybe during the Super Bowl, where you have all of these commercials back to back to back, and one of the main themes in those commercials is, you deserve it, or, you know, you had a long day, don't you want this great thing that you worked so hard and you need to take a break, and, you know, it's all about you. Oh, but, you know, I can't go to McDonald's and just get, you know, a Big Mac and a large fry and a shake and a Coke and some cookies because I'm on a diet, and that would be bad. And then like 3 hours later, you're in the drive-thru at McDonald's ordering a Big Mac and a shake and a large fry because you saw it on TV and you knew that you wanted it, and you can always start again tomorrow. Our willpower, our self-control is really bad because the way that the world markets to us is you deserve to have this thing that isn't it so good? You know that it's good. You know you like that McDonald's special sauce. You know that you really like when the fries are like hot and fresh and you dip them into your milkshake. And can you tell I'm hungry? Your willpower just melts away when you get placed in a situation where you have to choose between doing what you know you should be doing and maybe taking a little bit of a bite of the Big Mac. It's there, it's free. If I brought you food on, you're in the middle of your diet and you're not on a cheat day, and I brought you food, well, they spent the time to bring this to me and the money, so I guess I'll just have a little bit, it's fine. And then a little bit turns into like 4 bags of chips later, and you're binging on the couch and you're watching Netflix, and how did this happen? That's our self-control, in a nutshell. Completely. And so we get this idea that we deserve, that we want, but also, on the same spectrum, we also have this idea that I have really good self-control, and I'm really, really good at exercising willpower, and I stick to things, and I'm just, I'm on top of it. You can't have both. This is just, you can't have your cake and eat it too, as the phrase goes, which I don't understand that phrase very much, but whatever. You can't be someone who gives in at every moment of opportunity, of every sign of weakness, but also then be someone who's self-proclaimed prideful of my behavior, my willpower, my ability. And so, I want you to think about these 3 words, and you don't have to say anything, but you can chuckle if you want. The 3 words that I think completely ruins our idea of our own self-control. 5 more minutes. Or maybe 10 more minutes, or 20 more minutes. Any of those combination of those 3 words completely dissolves and evaporates any semblance of self-control that we might have. Because who wants to get up at 6 when you can get up at 6:05 or 6:15? Those minutes are very crucial to your sleep, I promise. But when we can hit the snooze button, more often than not, we do. You hit snooze, you roll over, and your willpower is gone. You were the CEO of this company, and you worked so hard to get to where you're at, and so now you're at a point where you can just hit snooze and it's fine. Autopilot takes over, and sleep, precious, sweet sleep, beckons you back, and you roll over. And then you wake up in a scramble. I don't know if you've done this, but I've done this. You wake up in a scramble with like 20 texts. Hey, we're outside. Are you ready? We're leaving now. And you're like, oh, I have 5 minutes to shower, brush my teeth, put on clothes, and do everything else that I need to do before leaving. And some of those things get skipped. And so, if I had exercised better self-control, I would have been up an hour ago, ready to leave when I'm supposed to leave with, the right outfit on and matching socks and my hair brushed. But instead, I let my self-control wither and disappear and pull me into this rushed state that I never intended or planned to be in. And despite how urgent your day might be, those few extra minutes in the moment were worth it. No matter how much chaos or problems or issues that it causes for you later throughout the day, those 5 more minutes in that moment was worth it. But it's not worth it when you get to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you've got 7 more files that you have to get through, and you've got 10 phone calls that you have to answer, and 6 emails that have gone unread. It's not worth it then. and you shift your plans around, and you try to accommodate for this lack of willpower that you have to actually do the things that you're supposed to be doing. We are convinced that we change the things we dislike about our lives if only we put more energy towards them. I don't like the way that I look, so I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to work out, and I'm going to drink a lot of water, and I'm going to eat a lot of salads, and in like 6 months, I'll be where I want to be. Fun fact, does not work like that. I don't know if you've tried it. Does not work. 6 months is not long enough. You got to stick with it. And so you start January 1. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to drink more water, and I'm going to do all these great things to make myself better. But did you know that a study was done in 2012 that nearly 80% of people who joined a gym in January of 2012 quit within 5 months? They didn't even make it to the 6th month. Some of them probably didn't even make it to the 3rd month. They joined a gym, they signed up, they went through all the paperwork, they maybe went 3 or 4 times, and they said, yeah, that's enough of that, which I understand, but still, 80%. That's a lot. That's a lot of people who had the desire to do something and didn't have the willpower to get it done. Is that where we're sitting in our life? Is that where we're sitting in our walk with Jesus? Do we have the desire to be somewhere, or to know something, or to do something, or to be in action, and yet we can't make ourselves do it because it's hard or it's scary? You can't change your behavior by willpower alone. A deeper reorientation of the heart is needed. If you're not fully invested in what you're looking to change, if you're not completely sold out to whatever it is, if it's the gym, if you're not completely sold out to going, if it's not a life or death situation for you, even if it's not life or death, eventually you're going to stop going because it doesn't actually matter. You're making surface changes that don't really reflect the changes, or not, that are going on inside of you. Your mind might be saying, yes, we need to go to the gym, we need to be healthier, we need to lose those extra 20 pounds so that we can, be at our maximum health level. But if your body says, 5 more minutes, more often than not, you're going to fall into what your body wants to do and not what your mind wants to do. Today, I'm inviting you to turn your life inside out. And that is only by giving your whole self to God. Spirit, body, and mind. It's not easy, and it's not quick. So if you're looking for an easy, quick fix, I'm very sorry, because this isn't it. But if you trust me, it will be worth it. It can be done. Even though we may try to surrender to God through our will only, if we do surrender fully in our mind, our body, and our spirit, our changes and the places that we're looking to be will happen. Not because of anything that we've done ourselves, but because we've decided that our bubble, our circle, doesn't really get the job done. And we discovered that it doesn't work. And so, as soon as we fully give up everything, that's when his bubble opens up and shows us, okay, I can do this, but I can't do this. Does that make sense? He can do it in me if I'm willing to give up everything that is holding me back to what I want. Sometimes we try to spiritualize our surrender. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've ever said, well, I'm a good person, and I go to church once a week, and I give, my offering, and I pray over meals, and sometimes I see Bible verses on photos on Facebook. I'm spiritual, and God loves me, and it'll be fine, it's okay. And we use that to justify still thinking about sinful things and still living a life of sin rationalizing this idea that, well, I'm trying, and God's like He's forgiving, and so it's not really, if I just mess up a little bit and still want to do what I want to do, He'll forgive me. One of the most dangerous things that I've heard, which I tend to only use jokingly, is ask for forgiveness before you ask for permission. Don't do that. Don't do something and then ask for forgiveness after you've done it, especially if you know that you don't have permission to do it. I don't know how many stories in the Bible that this has happened, and trust me, it doesn't work out. If you have children and you've seen this play out where they're like, well, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to anyway, and then I'm going to tell my parent I'm sorry if it goes wrong. Yeah, you get it. You know that it doesn't work out, and I can feel it, the blood boiling in all of the parents, like, yes, I remember when they did that. And I don't have kids, but I understand. You say you don't do something, or you imply not to do something, and then they're like, well, it's probably not that bad. And so they do it, and they're like, yeah, I did it, and then it's like bad. It's like not good. Like, I probably should have done that, sorry. Don't ask for forgiveness first. Ask for permission first. Because when we do that, and I'm speaking currently directly about asking permission from God, when we do that, when we go to Him and ask, hey, these are my expectations, this is what I really like to accomplish. And He's like, maybe not. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Stop doing that. If we don't listen, we will probably find ourselves in a place where, one, we've gone through experiences that we didn't need to, and two, it's a lot harder to dig ourselves out of places that we've put ourselves. God can do it. I'm not doubting that at all. But sometimes when we dig ourselves into a hole and we look to God as the last resort, the rescuer, that's all we ever see Him as. We don't see Him as the person that we should be asking first. We don't come to our parents after we've, made all these mistakes and now we're homeless and we've been living behind Walmart for 6 months, and then we finally go to our parents and we're like, hey, I messed up and I need some help, please? No. We usually talk to our parents or the people that we trust most when we're beginning to get into a situation where it's like, this isn't looking great, what would you suggest I do? How would you suggest I go forward? Or what's your opinion? What's your advice? We seek counsel from our peers and the people that we know have our best interests at heart before we just go ahead and do reckless things that we know is going to put us in a situation where, I can't really get out of that one now. And so that's what I'm saying we should be doing with God. When our heart isn't completely turned to what He has for us, if it's not completely rooted in the surrender that He is calling for us, then we get to this point where we've been on our own, we've been dealing with it, we've struggled, and it's not working. And then we finally get to a point where we're like, okay, I guess I'm not in the know-it-all and I don't have the answers, and so we move to God. But how much greater would it have been if we started with God and we didn't have the time down in the valley to begin with that is a result of our own poor choices. We try to convince ourselves that because our heart belongs to Christ, it's somehow okay to continue having sinful thoughts or actions, and in reality, that makes us half surrendered. I want to be here, but I'm here. And I don't know how to move from one to the other. And that's because you're trying to do it by yourself. Well, that's because we are trying to do it by ourselves. Because I'm not exempt. I try to do it on my own, ask literally anybody here. I try to do it on my own, and I try to fix it myself, and I bet you understand what I'm going through. that you want to do it yourself. You want to take pride in the things that you're accomplishing, and you want it to work the way that you envision it working. But if we're only half surrendered, it might work the way that you're envisioning it working, but if you're living for God and you have God-sized dreams, your human-sized capability is not going to create God-sized events. It's not going to create God-sized results, because you can't, and you won't. So we're going to look at something you might be extremely familiar with. It's our WordPress version of Romans 12, 1 and 2. This is what we've been using the last 3 weeks, and we're going to go through it. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. And so I'm going to give you 3 points. As we go through this, I'm going to give you 3 points. And it's going to help you navigate what we're talking about in surrender. How do you get there? What does it look like? And so on. And it's going to show the difference between our own thoughts and show us how to steer our lives based on God's thoughts. The first one, willpower is not the same as surrender. It's not. I've been up here talking for like 20 minutes, and I've been talking about willpower, and I am not as far along in the message as I want to be, because I can't control myself from talking. And so willpower is not the same as surrender. It's just not. We've seen countless examples that I have given you. You've probably seen it in your life where your willpower has failed you. And so you know when you choose to give something up, and then all of a sudden you can't seem to stop encountering that thing, the McDonald's hamburger or the shake, that's your willpower failing. Because you're not surrendered to the idea of not having it. Eventually you give in, you have a cookie, you have a hamburger, you have whatever it is that you've been fixating on that you can't have because your inside is fighting with your outside. Outside, you look like you've got it all together. Outside, you're trying to behave the right way, but inside, I really want to go to McDonald's and get that hamburger. I really want a brownie right now. Your inside is fighting with your outside. And I'm pretty sure an important person once said that a house divided against itself can't stand. And so our insides and our outsides can fight each other for a limited amount of time, but eventually you're going to crumble. And you're going to fall to the thing that is most readily in your nature. And I hate to tell you this, if you don't already know, but it's sin. Our first nature, our first inclination is sin. And so when we're trying to fight against ourselves, we leave ourselves unchecked if we're not working on that inward. If we're not changing the inward, we're just masking the outward. Our attempts at behavior modification are going to be short-lived because they only work on the outside. And they only work for a short amount of time. While surrender and willpower may look similar for a while, they're going to be very different as time goes on because one is going to fall apart and you're going to break down because you're fighting with yourself every single day. And one is going to build you up and strengthen you because it started inward and is showing through on the outside. While we can begin with behavior by presenting our bodies as sacrifices, our surrender must spring up from the inward of our heart. Number 2, surrender starts with the heart. It doesn't start with your outside. People can look like they have it all together, they can look like they've got the dream, and still be a wreck inside. They can be stinky and rotten and in turmoil. But their outside is like really nice and polished, and they're dressed really well, and they've got the nice car, and they've got the nice family, and they've got the nice house. But every day they go home and they look at themselves and they hate themselves. And that's because it's not our outside, it's our inside. Surrender may begin with an outward sacrifice, but it can't go any farther if it doesn't reach the very core of who you are. Sure, we're taught to read the room. I hope you all understand social cues. We don't always get them right, and we adjust accordingly, but it's still only an outward change. Our surrender should not be a sign of social cues. Our surrender should be a sign of Christ coming in and making something that is broken and dirty and ugly into something that is new and whole and living for Him. Did you know that about 50% of teenagers that go to college disengage from religion if they were in youth group in high school? We do, and that's a pretty big statistic. We do our best to teach and lead and direct and lead by example, but if we don't actually disciple and dig deep into who these young people are, they're our future? No, they're now. They're here now, because we can't work on them when they're 80. They've set their habits. If they didn't have anyone else helping them along the way, they're going to struggle when they're looking for answers at 60, 70, 80. At that point, we failed. Because we failed to help them build an inward change. We fix our eyes on don't be on your phone, stop talking, pay attention. And I've said all of these things in youth group, and I say these not out of wanting them to look like they're paying attention, but because the things that I'm saying to them, I know for a fact will change their life if they let it. But if they pick up the cues and they hear, oh, as long as I look at her and I don't really talk super loud and I fix outside things that is making her upset, well, maybe that'll fix the problem. No, because I still get burdened and upset because they're not hearing it. Are you letting yourself fix the outside to adjust to everyone else, and you're not hearing it? Sometimes we miss God's voice, not because we weren't looking for it, but because we've stopped listening altogether. We can't hear it because it's not there, because we pushed it away for so long. Our hearts have to be rooted. I found this on Google. I did not make this. I would have loved to. Found this on Google. It's a youth group logo from a different church. And I loved it when I found it, because not only does it show the deep roots that are being invested into the nutrients, or Christ, but it's showing the results of that. We can't expect to have a full-grown tree if we've put our sapling in a bucket of water. Now, some plants do grow that way. I'm not a gardener. I'm not a gardener, and I'm not a plant person. I have fake plants. But I know that there are plants that do not thrive in just water. It can't happen. And so if we're not rooted in the nutrients of the soil, the things that we're getting from Christ, our fruit is just going to wither up and fall off and be worthless to everyone. We can't grow without our roots in something. That's why they say, and I haven't done this successfully, but that's why they say you take the plant from the small pot when it's first growing and you move it to a big pot, because the roots get all tangled up in there, and then they don't have anything that they can take from. And then that's why they die. And I'm pretty sure that's why I don't have any plants. But you put it in a bigger pot, it grows. It has the ability to stretch out and move and get the nutrients that it needs that it wasn't getting before. Number 3, surrender is an urgent matter. If you take anything away from this, it's this. Surrender is not to be taken lightly. It's not just for the more advanced Christians. It's not just for the people that are farther along in their walk. You, and I'm speaking to every single one of you, I'm going to try to catch everybody's eyes. You are being called to surrender. Because one, at this point in time, you don't know everything. I don't know everything. I don't know everything that I'm going to do wrong. I don't know everything that I might not even know is an issue right now. But I can surrender everything that I do know. And you're constantly being called to give that up. Your relationship with Christ began with surrender. So why should it stop there? Does he call you to give up things initially and then now that you've given them up, don't worry about all the other stuff? No, it continues with surrender. And unless you give up your desires, you live in a state of constant conflict. Paul says, I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate to do, but I do what I hate. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is my sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. And he says this in chapter 7 of Romans. So before we even get to 12, he's already saying, surrender is going to be hard, but you have to do it. You have to strive for it. Because then he sets it up in 12. Hey, this is how. It's going to be difficult, but you have to do it. If your right hand causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It's not a light matter. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's not a choice between chocolate and vanilla. Jesus made that clear in this statement. You have a choice and you have to choose. It's surrender or it's sin. You must choose surrender or you're defaulting to your sinful nature. Sure, you can coast for a while. You can make it on your own a little bit. But why do you think the world is the way that it is? It's ruled by a sense of self. It's ruled by a nature of sin. Choosing what is best for you can be hard, but it starts with simple, healthy choices. Seeking out help from people you trust. Praying, even if it's just over your meals. Start there. Surround yourself with positive influences to keep you accountable. One small step at a time to make larger surrender happen. So what do you have to gain from letting God work in your life? Not what you have to lose, because those things, they don't matter. But what you can gain is what matters. I want you to look at what we have to look forward to. An eternity with our Creator in heaven, who sent his Son to die for us on a cross when he didn't have to. A hope that lasts beyond the discouragements of today, the discouragements of tomorrow. And a peace that passes understanding that the world looks at us and goes, how? What do you have to gain from what God is offering you in your simple act of surrender? The inner and outer aspects of our lives are directly connected. Our full surrender will manifest in an outward shift, but a behavior change, chasing control of sinful desires will reveal a disconnected spirit. Our outside is only going to get worse and worse and worse if our inside isn't matching. What are you not surrendering? What are you holding on to that's keeping you from having a full life? Is it your actions? Is it your mind? Is it your heart? So I ask again, what do you have to gain from letting God take control of what you're not giving up? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time, that we can sit in your presence, that we can hear the whisper and nudge of your voice calling out to us. I ask that if this point in time there is anyone who has been ignoring you or pushing you away, I ask that you become so loud